Here we are. We're live now. I am Michelle Teheux. I write Untrickled. And with us every Thursday is Allison Tate. I'll let you introduce yourself.
I'm
I'm
Allison
Allison
Tate,
Tate.
and I write Inherited Inequality. And we're talking today about Social Security and all the bad news, the weird news, and all of the proposals around.
So I would have thought at one time that Social Security was a really boring topic. As someone who is 60, it has become increasingly interesting. In fact, I am very fascinated by it and highly alarmed that it turns out that in 2032 or possibly sooner, we're going to run out of Social Security money such that we will have to cut benefits by a quarter. As someone who was born in 1966, that tracks pretty darn closely with when I might start collecting it. So personally, if you're anywhere near my age range, you might want to be a little bit more concerned about this. And if you're younger, I don't know what you're going to do about it, but be aware because we do not have, I don't know if you follow politics very closely, but we do not have a very good relationship between the parties now, and their ability to get together and do difficult things politically is notably poor. So fixing Social Security would be extremely easy, but not simple.
True. So you kind of laid out the problem for us already. Right? We had a new report that came out, and it pushed up the OSI depletion date. Basically, just pushed it up a quarter, 2032. Yeah, which was earlier than last year's projection. And so that particular fund runs out. There is the Disability Insurance Trust Fund that's still around. And so basically the payout rate right now is 83%. And this is like Michelle said, absent exceptional action. Social Security won't be able to pay out like 78% of scheduled benefits starting in 2022. We always had it this happen, but it's now sooner than.
I see in the comments that the echo, we were aware before we started that her voice was echoing. I cannot hear it, but she can hear it. And we were hoping it wouldn't be visible to anybody else. Or
I can
say audible, not visible, audible. So we tried several things to fix it before we went live. I think this might be a Substack issue that we cannot fix, or we don't really know. There are many Substack technical issues that we have faced already in different days. So this might be another one, but I hope you'll bear with us. She will try her best to not echo, which is impossible.
I don't know what to do.
I'm sorry about that, everybody. It's annoying for me too.
I can't solve Allison's echoing voice problem, but we know that there are several different ways that we could really easily solve the Social Security problem. And if I were put in charge of it and they said, we'll just do what you say, Michelle, which is a way the country should actually be handling all problems. But if they did that, I would say, well, let's lift the cap, which is, check notes, $184,500. When you earn that, which some people earn on day one and many of us will never earn, you no longer pay. I remember a friend of mine once, like sometime in the spring, saying, oh, hey, I hit the Social Security cap. I've got more money now. I'm like, what? I'm in no danger of hitting that cap. I will pay Social Security on every penny I make. And in fact, because I'm self-employed, I pay double Social Security because people like me who are self-employed aren't getting the employer match. I see a note from my husband.
It has turned down its speaker level, which I just did. Well, I can still hear the echo, but it's not as loud. Disconnecting and reconnecting. Can I do that?
Sorry, we need your help. Come home from work right now. We've got a recording studio in our attic, and he loves to record music and also edits a podcast and things like that. And my idea of how this works is there's a volume control. Beyond that, I don't know what to do. This is too bad he's not home from work today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
Karen, so
back, still annoying.
if we were to cut the cap, and if you make $1 million, that $1 million is all taxed and with payroll tax, that would solve it in time. It wouldn't solve it immediately because we have not been doing that for years. So it would take time for that money to build up. However, it would eventually help a lot. In the meantime, we'd still have to either cut benefits or dip into other money. I don't feel so bad about dipping into other money because traditionally, back when we had more younger people and fewer older people, we were quite comfortable dipping into Social Security for other national expenses. So I think it's only right that we now consider doing the opposite if we can't, which might be the one thing that would make both parties come together and decide let's actually make some good changes and fix this. So yeah, we removing the cap would be good. The other thing we could do is instead of making this just a payroll tax that would only affect actual earned income, we could tax things like investments and capital gains and everything besides, it doesn't have to be just payroll taxes. Payroll taxes are something that are paid by the working stiffs. They are not paid by people who don't have an actual job but have plenty of money from investments and that's what they live on. They don't have to pay Social Security, as I understand it. So there's a couple of very obvious fixes that we could go to at any time. We've just chosen not to do that because this is an easy can to kick down the road. And I don't know about your state, but here in Illinois and in my particular city that I live in, they have both kicked their pension, not Social Security, but pension benefits way down the road because this may vary a little bit from state to state, but in Illinois, there is a separate sort of like a substitute for Social Security. I know the railroad is the same way. If you were on the railroad, you got a different non-Social Security pension. So the people who work in my city and anybody who works for the state of Illinois, and this is probably true in most cities, it was just so tempting when trying to balance the budget every year to say, let's not put all the money or as much money as we should, or maybe none at all, into our pension fund. This year, we've got this really big, important expense. You know what? We'll fund it next year some more. And the next year they didn't. The next year they didn't. And now we're at the point where the state of Illinois has really had to make changes because they didn't pay in. The employees were paying in, but the state wasn't paying in. And those chickens finally came home to roost. So it was real trouble. And the same issue in my particular small town, and this is probably true in some similar way to many small towns, we did not have to pay for garbage pickup for the entire time I lived here. And a few years ago, we had to because it turns out we needed 100% of our property taxes to pay for public safety pensions because we had not been funding those. And our police and firefighters were the retirement fund was becoming insolvent. So all of a sudden, everything I pay in property tax and everything all my neighbors pay in property tax goes just for public safety when it used to be used for general fund. And now we have to pay like $30 a month for garbage pickup, which used to be within the general fund. So people are not aware of this, but everything from your local to your state to your national budgets are affected by people just not wanting to pay for pensions. And most of us are doing this in our private lives as well. We are not putting away as much money as we, quote unquote, are supposed to be putting away for retirement because we have to repair the car or buy groceries or something. So this is not just a federal, not a state, not just a local. Nobody wants to put money aside for the future, and eventually we're all going to pay for it. Allison, how's your computer situation?
So it's about I tried to switch to my phone and it didn't let me do that. So I'm just I don't know what to do.
Oh, we continue to echo, I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah. So We did face this before. We faced this before, this depletion problem, depletion threat, and we faced it in 1983. And at that part, there was a bipartisan that came out, a number of solutions. But you felt like this is when we do have a bipartisan proposal to but it radically different than the bipartisan from 1983.
I can hear your echo now for the first time. So whatever you did, I can hear it more now.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I mean, so again, one of the things that's different now is the proposal that's out there, the capacity proposal that Ting has signed on. But we have a whole different set of solutions this time around how I think things are doing like what you mentioned earlier that we have and actually pulling some of the burden for replenish the social security stuff on people who are poor. Now we haven't talked about.
What's the number one thing that you would do to fix it? If again, they said Allison is now in charge of the U.S. budget, we'll do whatever she says. Yeah, what would you do?
I would definitely lift the weight cap. I think that's the go. I think it's ludicrously low. I think you said $185,000 is ludicrously low to stop. Everybody needs to stop. And I think that we should be putting the burden on people who can post all on it, and actually not putting the burden, but sort of like allocating burden proportionally to what people earn. And that would be my number one thing to do. And the last thing I would possibly do is to borrow money and put it in the equity market.
I'm against borrowing money, except if I reach the point where I need to draw Social Security and there isn't any money for it, in which case, do whatever you have to do. Make sure I get my Social Security. I have arranged my whole life with the idea that I would at least have Social Security. I do not have a pension of my own or anything like that. So my belief has always been I'll at least have Social Security. If worst comes to worst, if I am widowed, as if my husband and I die on the exact same day, I wouldn't be worried about it because we would have both of our Social Securities. The problem is if one of us dies quite young, the other does not have the spouse's Social Security was on. That's something that all married people need to be aware of, because if you're a single person, then you're aware and you're hopefully being able to make some kind of a preparation. But if you're married and you think, together we'll get X amount of money and we can make it on that, what happens if your spouse passes away and you have only your own Social Security? So I feel like everyone has to make a retirement plan that does not count on spouse's Social Security money. You have to have somehow or other, I hope you can have your Social Security, which I hope we fix. And I hope that some combination of either some funds that you have been able to save up for yourself or retirement or, some other sorts of funds. Maybe you can continue working. Most of us do not want to continue working till we're 85 and or, to when we die. But a lot of people have to. You go to the grocery store, who's working at the checkout? Many, many times it's a very elderly person. And I really doubt that most of those people are continuing to work as cashiers because that's their favorite thing to do. I mean, maybe some people really do just want to get out of the house. But if I see a lady that looks like she's around 75, 80 years old and she is checking out my groceries at Kroger, I'm assuming that this is what she has to do to survive. I don't think that's how society should operate. I think once people reach a certain age and have worked harder all their life, at some point you should be able to rest a little bit. And I don't think that's a crazy socialist idea. My own plan is to continue working more or less indefinitely, but my plan is not to be hopefully working at Kroger as a cashier. My plan is to be hopefully still making some amount of money on places like Substack Medium or whatever we have in the future, because if I can earn just a little bit of money on some sort of writing, I can do that even if I'm not physically very capable of doing it, other levels of work. Or so, as long as my brain holds out, um, I figure I can continue earning some kind of a side income. And but then again, do we want to live in a country where people who are getting older are still trying to figure out how they can make a side income? I would argue that that's just not a good way to be, especially when this is not a poor country. Everyone says that this is, supposedly the richest country in the world. I always say, like, no, that I see it as the United States as a country where some people are very, very rich. But again, half of Americans say they could not cover, I think it's a $400 emergency without borrowing it or putting on their credit card or something. Uh, at least half of Americans are not doing all that well. So the top half is doing great. The bottom half is not doing so well. And do we want to be tripping over cast out elderly people on the streets in 20 years? Or do we want to make sure that older people have enough money to pay for, a decent retirement? And we're talking about necessarily living on the beach in Florida or playing golf every day. I mean, I'm talking about having basic housing that's safe and decent. I'm talking about being able to buy reasonable groceries, being able to afford your heating and cooling and all your basic needs. Everyone should be able to afford that. And we have plenty of money. We have plenty of money in this country, but we're not collecting enough of it to provide that for everybody. And every time you see an elderly person who's working that does not really want to be, I feel like that's a failure of this country. This echo thing is really throwing us off here, people. Sorry about that. I really want to hear what Allison has to say. You have no audio at this point, I don't think, Allison. I'm going to assume everybody can hear me, but not Allison. I'll continue to talk.
Okay.
Oh, there you are. Good.
I don't know what to do.
Sorry. I tried switching it and it won't let me even come down. So I don't know. I'm going to that. Maybe I'll just type things. I don't know.
I see a
So
comment.
I know it's annoying for everyone.
The problem occurred when working class, this is Pisces in motion. The problem occurred when working class wages stagnated and they were putting less into the system. It is only lack of political will and the GOP's hate for social services that the wage cap has not been raised. And honestly, yes, I've written about that. The fact that if the working class were being paid higher wages, the working class would also be contributing more into Social Security and not incidentally would also have a little bit of extra money to put into their 401k or something. And if you are paying people only enough money to cover a bare bones existence, that person is not able to save enough money. And I can already predict what the far right is going to say about this problem when in 2032 or perhaps earlier, they say, we're going to have to cut everybody's benefits by a quarter. And when people start howling, I will guarantee you my entire Social Security fund that the complaint is going to be, these people should have known better and should have saved more money. Social Security was never supposed to be something you lived on. It was always supposed to be a supplement. Why didn't these people making $10 an hour save $100,000 a year like I did? They just weren't being prudent. That is what we will hear. And we can see this coming. This is like, we see it coming. It isn't going to be a surprise when it hits. It's like you're watching a car wreck come in slow motion, but you decide, I'm not going to take my foot off the gas or I'm not going to do anything. I see the crash coming. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and let the crash come. And the sooner we fix a problem like this, the more options we have. Had we lifted the cap from the very beginning, or had we never put the cap in place, I should say, if the cap had never been in place, the fund would be bursting with money and we wouldn't have this problem. If we had expanded it beyond payroll taxes to investment income, so forth, the problem would not be occurring. And also the things we're doing right now is throwing gasoline on the fire by severely restricting immigration. That is not helping. newsflash that the Republican Party doesn't understand, apparently, is that immigrants are actually very good for Social Security. They come over. These are the people who are working a lot of these jobs. Some of them who aren't eligible to ever receive Social Security because they're using a fake number. I'm not saying that's a great thing. It's not a good thing. But think about it. If you're using a fake number, they will be paying into Social Security the entire time, and they will never collect Social Security. So that's just a pure gift to the rest of us. That should not be that way. But that probably has been helping the fund out. And that's probably not working that much anymore. But by cutting off immigrants and actually reducing our population size, that's not doing Social Security any favors whatsoever. So yeah, we're making it worse. And we continue to make moves in our tax code that benefit the wealthy and do not benefit Social Security. And I just wish that we would take one of the prudent steps now that would keep us from having to make draconian cuts later on. Anybody have any ideas about this audio?
I know.
The feedback is on your side. Yeah, we don't know why. She's tried restarting, and she's tried both her phone and her computer. And someone said microphone level might be very high to max. That can create the feedback echo too. The feed is also very noisy, pointing towards high mic level. Let's see, here's another comment from Power of the Pod. I believe not all people who are more exposed to higher paying jobs should be doing them. Half the GPS have no desire or purpose to be doing the job. There is a place for everyone in this world, but it seems all those who are more privileged become the very place they shouldn't be. The drain of the welfare given to corporations. And another comment saying, in the 1950s or 60s, the group of calculated Social Security forecast based on increase of wages continuing to be solvent. They specifically ran the numbers due to concern for the number of baby boomer births. Yeah, the baby boomers are obviously retiring now. And in fact, I'm Gen X. I'm an older Gen X. And many people in my age range, I am 60 years old, are really interested in retiring. Some actually are retiring. You can retire at 62 and get a partial Social Security payment. And if you have enough investment income, then that's great. Retire at 62, get your Social Security and have plenty of other money to live on. That isn't the case for people like me. I'm not planning to take mine at 62 unless something really changes. My plan is to take mine at 67. And that's coming up faster than I think, though. I mean, that we're talking 6-7 years when a lot of people in Gen X cohort like me will be retiring, and we are going to expect to get the money we were promised. And I don't know. I see a lot of people my age at these marches. We are kind of fired up already. I'm not seeing that many young people at all the protest marches saying basically we need to fix the system. But I'm seeing a lot of people with my hair color at these marches. We're going to be, if we can continue our health, we're going to be the worst burr under the saddle of anybody, because we're not going to take this quietly lying down. I will personally be out there raising hell if they cut my Social Security by 25%, because, again, I have been paying into this since I was about 15 years old, and I've been counting on it this entire time, and I don't think you can fairly change that at the 11th hour. And if they do that, I don't think I'm going to be the only person who's mad. Social Security is an enormously popular program. For all that, a very few number of extremely vocal Republicans are complaining about it. But to be honest, what's that number? Who knows that number off the top of your head? The number of people, Americans who support Social Security. It's an extremely high number. Almost everybody is in favor of it. And honestly, most of our social programs like this Medicare, Medicare is also a popular program, and you cannot go cutting. You can call them entitlements, but they call them entitlements because you are entitled to them because we have paid into them. So we are entitled to them. And the day will come when all of us probably will not be able to work anymore. We might think like, oh, I'll just never retire. Well, for one thing, the workplace may decide that for you because a lot of people end up retiring not because they really, really wanted to retire, but because they were forced out. And ageism is a thing. I know I've certainly experienced it. And so you might think you might be 60 years old or something and think, I'll just never retire. And you might get pink slipped and there you are and you're retiring. So at that point, you better hope that you're getting at least what Social Security has always been promised to you. The other thing is you may plan that I'll just never retire. I'll keep working forever. And you may have a healthcare issue come up and it may be impossible for you to work. And again, if that happens, you may retire much earlier than you'd ever hoped to. And these things aren't completely up to us. And I also see a comment here from Pisces in Motion. The lower your initial Social Security payment, taking retirement early, the less you get with the COLA each year. Plus, the COLA is based on factors that no longer align with the cost of living. Yes, when we talk about the cost of living, we used to base that on the formula we used to base that on is off. Certain costs have gone up a lot more than others. We always talk about how cheap goods are. And I thought, well, yeah, a lot of goods are cheap, but the things that aren't cheap are the things like healthcare, housing, and for people who have children, childcare. Those things are extraordinarily expensive. And so two of the three everyone has. And I always say you can't go to a thrift store and buy a secondhand healthcare policy. And you cannot, there's only so many ways to get education that don't involve student loans, assuming you don't have generational wealth. So the question is, if people don't have enough money to live and they don't have enough money to pay into their own pensions and they don't have Social Security coming in, what do you think is going to happen to elderly people in the future? We already are the highest, fastest growing section of old people. The fastest growing group of homeless people are the elderly. The elderly people are really having trouble paying for housing, and there's no surprise why. They're probably like me, who bought a house for like under $50,000 at one point in their life. But if you try to buy a house now, you will not find a house for $50,000. Even I can't find a house for $50,000 anymore. And so, where are people supposed to live? If the cheapest rent you can find anywhere is like $1,000, and you don't have a lot of income, something has got to give. And what's got to give is seniors living in their cars, seniors living on the street, seniors dying of preventable issues like that happen when you don't have a place to stay. Already, the American life expectancy is dropping in other areas of the world where they have good social programs, and your basic industrialized countries. People are actually living longer lives, and our lives are dropping here. And part of why they're dropping here is because we've made it very difficult for people in the bottom half to live. And we're concentrating only on those people who are economically thriving. And again, the reason why I call my Substack Untrickled is because I object so strongly people saying that it's that things will trickle down. Like, it's not trickle down. Nothing is trickling. And what's this? I see that someone says, yes, but divorced women don't understand if they were married for 10 years, they can collect the Social Security payment their ex-husband receives or would receive if they died. And that is true. So if you're married 10 years and if you have not remarried, and that does not cut it doesn't cut your ex-husband's benefit. And if he's remarried, it doesn't cut his current or other ex-wife's benefit. You can still get that. And it's not as good as having your own, but it is something. That's another reason why if you're widowed and you expect to get a decent amount of Social Security based on your husband's record, do not remarry unless you have really looked at how the finances come in. Yeah, do not remarry, because if you do, you no longer have access to your previous husband's money. So if that's going to be at a good amount that's going to help you, you don't want to say goodbye to that. Substack, we're not happy with your tech. We want to hear what Allison has to say, and she's having to type it. So, yeah, more and more older workers. The other thing is, a lot of these types of jobs that don't take manual labor, we don't know if those are even going to be here with AI. Um, it's hard to foresee a time when we won't all need to call a plumber now and then. But you're probably not wanting an 80-year-old plumber who can perhaps barely get around. I mean, some 80-year-olds are still spry, but we've all known 80-year-olds who really would not be capable of getting into your house and doing electrical or plumbing work or carpentry work or things like that. If you're doing manual labor, your body will wear out and you will need to retire. So a lot of older people, even if they did do a job that took manual labor when they were younger, if they still want a job when they're older, that's when you become the Walmart greeter or the cashier at Kroger, or things of that nature that don't take a great deal of physical strength to do. And those jobs, by and large, there's a real question whether most of those jobs are even going to exist in 10 years, because AI has already taken over a lot of these simple things. A lot of people use a self-checkout. Every time a self-checkout is used, that is some 75-year-old woman that doesn't have a job as a cashier. So it's all kind of a mixed blessing there. I see Allison says, also, we should be making people work when we could just live the pay. Oh, should we be making people work when we could just lift the payroll tax cap? I would be in favor of lifting that tax cap. That is the number one thing I would do. I would do it absolutely today. I would call the Congress in a special section, and I would say, I've locked all the doors. No one uses the bathroom until we lift the caps on this Social Security. And that's the first thing we're going to do. After that, I'll allow you to use the restrooms, and then we're going to come back and we're going to fix the rest of it. So again, put me in charge of the country, and that is the first thing I will do. One of the first things I will do. I have several things that I would set in motion. That's kind of a fun exercise to think, if you were made dictator for a day, what would you do? That is one of the things I would do. I would also get us right out of Iran. I would beg Iran let's go back to that agreement we had with Obama. Can we please do that? We're very sorry that we tried to get something better. We now realize that we cannot. Can we go back to that agreement? There's a few things like that I would do. I'd also get all the gold out of the Oval Office. We got to stop me now because I've got lots of things that I would do. Let's start with Social Security today, though. Let's lift that cap. I would recommend that everybody call their representatives and say, lift the cap. And that's not a bad thing to do. But the thing is, everybody knows this. This is a really, really, really simple story problem that any 14-year-old in a math class, even someone who's very weak at math like me, would be able to do and say, well, is this a trick question? Because this seems like a really easy question. Here's the situation. And if we didn't have a cap on Social Security, we would have enough money to pay for everybody. Why would we have this cap? And I don't know what the original reason was for the cap. I'm assuming, I'd have to look this up to be sure, but I'm assuming that originally that cap seemed like a very pie in the sky number. Like today we might say oh, we'll have it up to $1 million or something. I'm assuming when that number was set, $184,500 sounded like something that very few people would earn. And that's no longer the case. There's a lot of people who do make that. It is, not most of us, but there's a significant number. And those who do, some of them make significantly more than that. I mean, again, we have people that are making millions and millions a year and only paying into the Social Security fund up to the first $185,000. And there's just no reason to have that cap in place at all. And again, if we took the cap off now, it still wouldn't completely fix the problem because the cap was in place for too long, but it would certainly solve the problem in the future. And there would be a few years we'd have to catch up in one way or another. But what I do not want to do We already raised. It used to be 65 was the retirement age. We all agreed 65. And honestly, if you have older parents, or if you're my age, again, I'm 60. 65 seems like about the right number for most people. It's probably too late if you're doing manual labor, because your body does wear out. You end up with back problems, joint problems, the whole 9 yards. If you've got a laptop job, you can probably work more than 65. But 65 is a good number, unless you're going to get into everybody's business and analyze just how hard your job is. 65 is a good, decent number. You still hopefully have some years of good health in front of you, but you don't need to be working long hours anymore. So we already increased it. Like I said, for me to get the full amount, I will have to work till 67. And that's fair. I was going to say people are living longer. We used to be living longer, but in the last 10 years or so, the American life expectancy has dropped. It's been dropping every year lately. So we may get to the point where we have to make it younger because nobody is living long enough to even collect anymore. I guess that is one way to solve the Social Security problem. Let everybody die before they reach the age of full requirement. I guess at that point, Social Security becomes very flush because everybody pays into it and dies, never collects. And that's the other thing. I believe 10%, don't quote me on that figure, but I believe 10% of Americans do die without ever collecting. My sister is one of these people. She had a car accident at age 52, didn't get to enjoy one single day of retirement. She, would have worked for at least another decade or so. And all that money she paid into Social Security will instead go to other people who are fortunate enough to still be alive in time to collect in their older age. So, the whole idea of Social Security is you spread the risk around. If everybody were responsible for saving their own retirement and they were totally on their own, some people would have no problem saving for their own retirement. Some people could do it with difficulty, and some people would be unable to do it at all. And that's why we started Social Security, was the idea that nobody wants to trip over the corpses of starved to death old people on the street. Let's do something so that doesn't happen. And so we decided that Social Security would be this great idea so that older people who were at that point, largely the most destitute people in society, would be in better case. And it worked. It lifted a lot of seniors, not all, but a lot of seniors out of poverty. Today, the people most likely to be destitute are young people, especially children. Children are our poorest people. Now, I argue that that's another problem. That's another whole issue that I care about a lot. But we're talking about Social Security today, so we'll save that for another day. We should not have a nation of poor children, but we also shouldn't have a nation of poor seniors. Especially when they're people who have worked for decades and would just like to have a little bit of rest and relaxation at the end of their lives. So the idea was, okay, Social Security would be kind of like a giant insurance, a giant insurance fund. It functions a little bit like that, not totally. But the idea is everybody would pay in, and then everybody would eventually get something. And some people would pay in more than others. You actually do get a little bit higher ratio of return if you're a low income than if you're higher income. And that just makes sense. People who are high wage earners do make more, but they make more actual dollars, but they make more, or they make less as a percentage of how much they put in than a poorer person did. So anyway, so the whole idea is it's very much like house insurance. I pay insurance every month on my house with the idea of if a tornado hits or it burns down, I'll get my house back, or can fix or repair or rebuild it, knowing that I'll probably never ever collect. But if I am that one unlucky person, then it will be there for me. And so again, when you pay into Social Security, it's not the same as saving up your own money that you can pass on to your family, but we all pay into it. We all get something back. And I don't know why we wouldn't want to do that, because we will always have people out there who are just incapable of saving up enough money to live on for the rest of their life. I'm very much one of those people. And, you have to ask yourself what kind of society we are. Do we care about our elderly people or do we not? And it's looking like we don't, actually. But I have a feeling that people who are older and don't have generational wealth and haven't had a high enough paying job that they could put back a large amount of money. I think you'd have a hard number of people saying like, no, it's cool. I can live on $800 a month, which is, by the way, what some elderly people do live on right now. And their only way they can live is some other sort of government program, like perhaps they can get into public housing or, maybe they're getting food stamps, something like that. But unless we want to be the kind of society just completely turns our back on poor people, we have to fix this Social Security problem. And also Substack needs to fix this feedback problem. I can't hear you, Allison, and I really want to hear what you have to say. You've got so much information about this. Pisces in Motion says 49% of women between 50 and 66 have no savings, pension, or 401k. I believe it. Yeah. Because again, women 50 to 66, a lot of those women probably either worked a lesser job because they were busy raising children, or they took many numbers out of, they took many numbers away from their careers, or many years out of their career so they could raise children. Or in some cases, they just assumed that their husband's money would always support them, and they, took care of the home and did volunteer work and things like that. And some of those women could find themselves in a very bad way, especially if, gray divorce is a thing. You've got a lot of people who are divorcing later in life. So women who thought, you know, before the trad wife was a thing, when they were just, like, I'll stay home and take care of the kids and house, and I'll help his career and he'll make lots of money and we'll both share in the money, which was a very viable way to live in 1950 something. But it is not working out so well today because, again, not only, not only is divorce a thing, and I have to point out, the divorce rate is actually lower. It got much higher in, I believe, like the 70s, because a lot of women who were in really shitty marriages could finally leave them. And so women weren't like leaving for like frivolous reasons. A lot of that legendary high divorce rate was because they were married to assholes who mistreated them, and they didn't want to be married to assholes anymore. And now they didn't have to because they were able to get a job. But still, there are a lot of older women who I'm someone who took 7 years off to raise my children, and I don't regret it. But I realize now, more so than I could realize back then, that really took a big chunk out of my Social Security. I wasn't worried about this at all because I just knew my first marriage was going to last, but it did not last. And big surprise, the person who continued working all those years and who I helped support in his career and whose master's degree I helped pay for and blah, 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 that person retired early with a great pension. Um, I am not retiring and I do not have a pension. I should say, in the interest of being like really, really, really transparent, I do get about $200 a month from my ex-husband's teacher's retirement system. So I do have that $200 a month, which I'm not planning to ever live on. When he dies, that ends. So may he have a long life because I need that $200, 200 and something a month. Based on, so there might be a lot of people, but you get some little tiny chunk from an ex or from a former spouse. They're either widowed or divorced. Some people will get some small amount, but for a lot of people, it will not be anything near enough to live on. It'll just be one part of the patchwork that you put together to try to survive your old age. And again, we used to take care of our older people. People did not live as long. You didn't linger in ill health. You had grandma, staying in the extra bedroom, and while she was a little bit younger, she helped with household, she helped with her children and things like that. And then at some point, about my age, probably she passed away, and they buried her out back. I guess we could go back to that. I did note that my daughter has an extra bedroom in the house she just bought. I haven't yet asked her if I can have that in 20 years, but let's just say I'm motivated to continue staying on my children's good side, because if they cut my Social Security by 25% and something happens to my husband at a young age, I have to say to my daughter, like, hey, that spare bedroom you have, you're not using it for anything, right? You and your husband would love for me to come live with you, right? I'd really rather not do that, but, if worst came to worst, there's going to be a lot of families having conversations about that. I think, intergenerational living is not most people's first choice, but it might be the only choice for some people. I don't think that one of the worst ideas is borrowing to invest in the equities market. Oh, excuse me. I also think that one of the worst ideas in borrowing to invest in the equities market. I do not know enough about this to talk about it a whole lot. This is where I was hoping that you would be able to talk, because you do have things to say about this that we would all like to hear. But you say that is nothing but a profit plan for Wall Street. And yeah, shock and horror. Allison has put these numbers down. So in 2026, the cap is 184.5. In 2025, it was 176,100, and it's gone down from there. So it's rising each year, but not much, not by much. And when it was signed into law in 1935, Allison has typed life expectancy at birth was about 60 for men and 64 for women. Wow. So yeah, I would be statistically about 4 years from death. I do not hope to be 4 years away from death. I don't even think that I will be drawing Social Security at 64. I would really like to draw Social Security for a few years. I would like to enjoy my life at some point. Not that when I say enjoy my life, I'm speaking a little bit facetiously, but it's a grind, and I would cut down my publication schedule. I would certainly like my husband, who is 62. I would certainly like for him to be able to retire at some point. He still works very hard at a traditional job, and he's getting older. He's very fit. He's very healthy. But wouldn't it be nice if he could enjoy some of his fit, healthy years, spending them with me, doing some fun things, instead of just like working away? Getting up at 5:30 every morning and working. Uh, Again, this isn't laziness. It's a matter of you reach a certain age and your body does start to slow down. I mean, I've even noticed it a little bit. And a lo- I'm in relatively good health. There are people my age that are not in such good health. There's a big difference between 60-year-olds that you don't, the older you get, the more of a difference you see. You see some people who are like really vibrant and healthy in their old age, and you see other people who just really aren't capable of doing very much anymore. And if the really healthy, vibrant people want to continue working, that's great. But for the people that are really, really struggling to hold on to a job, why are we forcing those people to continue working when we could just raise the cap and a couple of other things like that? We could just raise the cap, and the people who are making this year 184.5, they are not going to suffer if the rest of their money is taxed for Social Security. They'll be completely fine. I think the great majority of them probably actually are in favor of it themselves. I have not heard anybody that I know personally who's making high enough wages that they have to pay, get rid of the cap, that doesn't think like that's a little bit ridiculous. Why would I be able to stop paying this cap? They all, in most cases, they probably know somebody. They've got an elderly aunt or somebody that they know is subsisting on Social Security, and they would actually really like to see Social Security help people like that. And in fact, in some cases, I know people who are really well off are like directly giving money to relatives they have who really should be able to account on a little bit higher Social Security. So I'm going to wrap this up because I really miss Allison's voice, and it's getting close to 2:00, 2:00 my time. And so I'm going to try, we're going to really try to work on this and see if there's anything we can do to get Allison's voice operating. And if this is a Substack issue, or if it's one of her devices, or if it's a fluke that we can never solve, we do not know. But maybe we'll even do this topic again, or something adjacent to it, because I know that Allison is sitting there bursting with things to say that we would all like to hear. So this week you got mostly me. I'm sorry about that. Next week we hope to have this issue solved. Allison, type your goodbye. I'll say goodbye to both of us, and we'll see you next week. Hopefully we will not have echo and we'll have good audio. Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye-bye.